Welcome back to This Week in Politics here on KSFY. It is late November of 1963. John Kennedy has been assassinated. His vice president, Lyndon Johnson, has assumed office. Johnson has decisions to make now on what policies to continue and what policies to change. He has Vietnam on his plate, civil rights, and John Kennedy's plan to put man on the moon. In 1961, Kennedy had named Johnson head of the National Aeronautics and Space Council, putting him specifically in charge of the mission to make sure Americans landed on the moon first by the end of the 1960s. Johnson had played an integral decision-making role in the Mercury and Gemini programs, which put Americans in space and led to the first American spacewalk in 1965. But it would be the Apollo program that was to put man on the moon. And that Apollo program would show how dangerous the mission was. 3 astronauts died in Apollo 1 in 1967. A fire on the launch pad ended the mission before it started.
And one of the things that deeply worries the astronauts, themselves test pilots by training, is that not too much be made of their dying when it happens. That accidents in spaceflight, exposed as it is to the glare of publicity, not be overemphasized.
Apollo missions 2 through 10 were successes, testing the rockets that would push the astronauts into space, the systems that would propel them to the moon, and the module that would allow them to land on the moon. It was decided that Apollo 11 would be the mission to put man on the moon.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
It is July 16th, 1969.
The one question that is raised most often, over and over again, talk about redundancy, is why go to the moon? Well, for scientists, of course, the answer is obvious. They feel that the unexplored moon, thus far unexplored, will tell us many things about our Earth that we cannot find out by studying the Earth itself.
4 days later, on July 20th, 1969, with the use of audio from NASA and animated graphics from ABC News, the world heard the words that changed history and made true the mission laid out by John Kennedy a little more than 8 years before.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
And 6 hours after the Eagle landed, it would be Neil Armstrong's turn to step onto the lunar landscape of the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And of course, that is the quote that has gone down in history. But what followed that quote was Armstrong's first impression of the lunar surface, the first description from anyone ever of what the surface was like of a planetary body that wasn't Earth.
Surface is fine and powdery. I can pick it up loosely with my toe. It does adhere in fine layers, like powdered charcoal, to the sole and sides of my boot.
What had seemed like science fiction less than a decade earlier had become science fact.
So America has been to the moon and back safely and successfully. And we think perhaps in the process rediscovered itself and discovered that it can do anything it sets out to do.
A look at how political will took man to the moon on this 50th anniversary weekend of the success of the Apollo 11 program.